The alley was cold and dark. I was crouched behind a dumpster trying to knot the torn hem of my skirt. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. I just needed to get home to my brother, Liam. I had to warn him to lay low. That's when I heard it, a wet thud, then a groan. I peeked around the dumpster. Liam was on his knees on the wet pavement. Two men in dark suits stood over him. I knew who they worked for, Sela's Crow. The one with the gun raised it, slow and casual. He pulled the trigger. The sound was a sharp crack in the narrow space. Liam fell forward. I slapped my hand over my mouth. My whole body went cold. I squeezed my eyes shut, but I could still see him falling. When I forced my eyes open, he wasn't moving. And the other man? He was looking right at my hiding spot. He took a step toward me, then another. He was close enough that I could see the sharp crease in his trousers. My hand stopped shaking. I don't know why. A strong arm wrapped around my waist from behind. It dragged me backward through a door. It was Dominic Morty, the man I loved, the man I feared. He shoved me into his office and locked the door. I backed into his desk, sobbing. "Don't touch me, let me go." He stood by the door. He didn't come closer. He just ran a hand over his face, and for 1 second his shoulders slumped. I'd never seen him look tired before. It made my crying hitch. "I'm not with them," he said quietly. He didn't look at me. He sounded ashamed. My eyes darted around the room. They landed on a framed photo on his desk. A younger Dominic smiling with an older couple. A real smile. I stared at it. Then I looked at the man in front of me. The two images didn't match. We stood there in silence. The only sound was my shaky breathing. He took half a step toward me, then stopped. The space between us felt heavy. He finally turned his back to me and checked the peephole in the door. That photo felt like a lie, and I'd been wrong to ignore it. He put me in his car. The door was locked. The window wouldn't go down. "Let me out right now," I said. My voice was thin. He stared straight ahead, his hands tight on the wheel. "You saw a Crow execution tonight," he said, his voice flat. "They will kill you for that. They will kill Liam to get to you." I turned to face him. "You're kidnapping me. You're a criminal too. You're no better than them." He was silent for a long moment. The leather of the steering wheel creaked under his grip. "Yes," he finally said. His voice was hard. "And now my only choice is to hide you or bury you." The truth of it hung in the air. I went very still. My hands had stopped shaking in the alley. Now I knew why. This was the real danger. The car turned down a hidden driveway. A dark, square safe house came into view. I wiped my cheeks. I sat up straight. I had to get Liam out. That was the only thing left. I looked at Dominic's profile in the dash lights. "Will you get my brother?" I asked, my voice quiet. He cut the engine. The sudden silence was heavy. He didn't answer right away. He just looked at the dark house. Then he spoke, his voice low. "You listen to me. You do exactly what I say. You don't question me. You don't try to run. If you do, I can't protect him. I can't protect you. Do you understand?" He wasn't asking. It was the last thing he said before he opened his door. I moved toward the door. Whether he'd actually said yes moved with me. The chill from that car ride never left my bones. The next morning, I stood in the safe house kitchen. I stared at the greasy fingerprints on the counter. Dominic leaned in the doorway, watching me. The gun from last night sat on the table between us. I took a step toward him. The floor creaked. I needed to know what Sela's Crow wanted. I needed to know why they shot Liam. My hand touched his arm. His sleeve was crisp, but his arm underneath was solid, unmoving. "Tell me what's happening," I said. My voice sounded flat. He pulled his arm away like I'd burned him. He shook his head. His face closed off. He crossed his arms tight. "You don't need those details," he said. His tone was final. "Knowing makes you a target. Your only job is to stay quiet and stay inside." He looked past me to the window. A fly buzzed against the dusty glass. His world had almost killed me once. It would try again. "I'm already in danger," I whispered. My eyes stung. I looked down at my hands on the counter. My knuckles were white. "Liam is in danger because of me, because of you. Don't I deserve to know why?" The pleading in my voice shamed me. The only sound was the hum of the old refrigerator. Dominic's jaw tightened. He looked at me, and for a second his eyes weren't a boss's eyes. They were just a man's, tired, heavy. He almost spoke. His lips parted. Then he turned away sharply. He ran a hand through his hair. He walked to the gun on the table. He picked it up, checked the safety with a flick of his thumb, and slid it into his waistband. That was his answer. He would not break. Real quick, if you're here for the secrets this mafia boss is hiding, hit subscribe. You're about to find the one thing he never wanted anyone to see. The rest made sense. Why he'd almost spoken before reaching for the gun didn't. Later, I found myself pacing. The shower started upstairs. That was my signal. I moved to the hallway. The study door was slightly open. I slipped inside and shut the door without a sound. The room smelled faintly of lemon polish. A simple wooden desk sat under the window. I went to it. I pulled open each drawer. They were all empty. I lifted the green leather blotter on top. Nothing. My frustration was a hot knot in my throat. I slammed the bottom drawer harder than I meant to. The sound cracked in the quiet room. I froze, listening. The shower still ran. I got on my knees to check under the desk. My fingers brushed against something flat and stiff taped underneath. I peeled it free. It was a photograph in a silver frame. The photo showed a much younger Dominic. His hair was longer. He was smiling a real smile, his arm around a woman with dark, curling hair. She was laughing. They stood in front of a bright blue car. I stared at it. My heart beat hard against my ribs. This was a person he had erased. A floorboard creaked in the hall outside. The shower had stopped. I shoved the framed photo into my cardigan pocket. I smoothed the blotter back into place. My hands were shaking. I stood up and tried to look calm. Whether Dominic had heard the drawer open, that wasn't going away. Later, I stood in the kitchen doorway. Dominic was at the counter, checking the gun. I walked to the small table and placed the photo down. The sound was quiet. I watched his face. He looked at the picture. His eyes went cold. He didn't touch it. "That's not me anymore," he said. His voice was flat. He stood up so fast his chair scraped the floor. I took a step back. He hadn't chosen me. Something else had put us here. There was a difference. "Who was she?" I asked. My voice was small. His sudden move knocked my water glass over. It hit the floor and shattered. I gasped and pulled my hand back. A sharp pain bloomed in my palm. A thin line of blood welled up. He moved faster than I thought possible. Dominic grabbed a clean dish towel. He stepped close and pressed the cloth to my hand. Our faces were inches apart. I could see the dark flecks in his brown eyes. He held my wrist, his grip firm. His breath hitched once, a small break. He looked at the cut, not at me. His thumb pressed lightly against my pulse point. He was holding something back. I didn't know what to say. He led me to the sink and turned on the tap. The water was cool. He was careful. He checked my hand for any glass. His head was bent close to mine. This gentleness? It was a shock. It didn't fit the man I knew. It made my chest hurt. He dried my hand with a clean corner of the towel. He put a bandage over the cut, his movements slow and focused. Then he let go. He stepped back. The mask was back on. He picked up the photo from the table. He looked at it for a long time. He didn't say a word. He just put it in his jacket pocket. He had his answer now. He knew why he'd stopped himself from speaking earlier. He turned and left the kitchen without another word. Everything else I could figure out. But why he had stopped himself? That was different. The warmth of his fingers stayed on my skin, a sharp contrast to the chill I felt. I found myself standing in the middle of his living room. The air smelled sharp like lemon polish. I heard Dominic's voice from the kitchen. Then it stopped. A moment later, I heard the sound of a cigarette being crushed into glass. Dominic walked into the doorway. He stared at a blank spot on the wall above the sofa. His shoulders were a tight line under his dark shirt. I saw a small, pale burn mark on the back of his right hand. It was shaped like a crescent moon. He didn't look at me. He turned and began to pace the room. His steps were silent on the floor. "Liam called," he said. His voice was low and careful. "Crow's men are asking about a woman. They have your description from the restaurant." My need to know Liam was safe tightened like a wire in my chest. Dominic stopped pacing. He looked at the front door like he could see right through it. "They are closer than I thought. This place isn't safe anymore." He slammed the side of his fist against the doorframe. It was a soft, solid thud. He didn't shout. The control made it seem more dangerous. He pulled his phone from his pocket. His thumb moved fast over the screen. He was typing a message. He looked toward the bedroom where I'd slept. His eyes weren't cold then. They held a frustrated, raw urgency. It was the look of a man watching his careful plan burn. "We leave the day after tomorrow," he said. He didn't ask. "A different place, more remote, you won't like it." He put the phone away. He finally looked at me. He reached into his cardigan pocket and pulled out the framed photo. He held it for a second. Then he placed it on the small table beside me. His hand brushed the back of mine. The touch was brief and warmer than I expected. He had heard the drawer open after all. He knew I'd found it. He was giving it back. That was his answer. I pushed it aside. What he'd typed into his phone just before looking at me, that would come back? The cold dread from his call had settled as a permanent knot in my shoulders. I stood at the kitchen sink, staring at my own warped reflection in the faucet. I turned around. Dominic sat at the small kitchen table. He was waiting. I walked over and sat across from him. His ledger was open between us like a challenge. The cheap wood of the table felt sticky under my palms. I pointed to a column of numbers. My finger was steady. It didn't shake. "This isn't just one city," I said softly. My voice sounded strange in the quiet. "He's everywhere." I tapped the page. "Port fees here, trucking routes there. It's a whole network." Dominic looked away from me. He watched the faded wallpaper behind my head. He closed the ledger slowly. The cover made a soft thump, but he didn't take the book from the table. He left it there in my space. That was new. "Knowing this puts you in more danger," he said. He just admitted it. The truth slipped out. He hadn't meant to say it. I saw his shoulders drop a little. He rubbed the bridge of his nose with his thumb and forefinger. He looked suddenly tired. It was a small human thing. I saw the faint shadow of stubble along his jaw in the afternoon light. The way he'd looked at me just then, it wasn't about the threat. I didn't know what to do with that. We were inches apart across that small table. The air felt thick and still. I could hear the hum of the old refrigerator. He looked at my mouth. I held my breath. My heart was a loud drum in my ears. He leaned forward just a little. Then he stopped. He pushed back from the table so hard his chair scraped the floor. He stood up and turned toward the window, his back to me. The moment was gone, but everything in the room felt different now. One thing kept pulling at me, why my heart didn't slow down when he turned his back. The ghost of his silent confirmation sat like a cold stone in my gut. I found myself in the study's worn leather armchair. The air smelled of old paper and dust. Dominic stood by the heavy desk. He stared at the ledger I had found. His hand rested flat on its closed cover. The silence was thick. "You can't just hide me now," I said. I uncrossed my arms and stood up. My ribs ached where I'd hit the desk earlier. "I know what this book means. I know what Crow is." Dominic didn't look at me. He watched his own hand on the ledger. His fingers tapped once, a short and final sound. I saw his jaw tighten. Then he looked up. His eyes were dark and tired. For a second, I saw something like defeat in them. Another sharp crack came from the alley below the window. It sounded like wood splitting. We both froze. Dominic moved before I could breathe. He was across the room in 2 long steps. His hand closed around my arm and he pulled me back from the window. His body blocked my view of the street. We stood there in the dark study. I could hear his breathing. I could feel the heat of his hand through my sleeve. Down in the alley, a cat yowled. The tension left his shoulders, but his grip didn't loosen. His hand was still on my arm. I wasn't trembling. I was perfectly still, and that felt worse. Hiding me wasn't enough anymore. He knew it. I saw the calculation in his face change. It hardened into something new. He turned to face me fully. He still held my arm, not to restrain me now, but to anchor us both. "The plan changes," Dominic said. His voice was low and rough. He searched my face for something. Then he asked the question. His eyes never left mine. "Now that you know what you're up against, are you going to run, or are you going to fight?" But what he was searching for in my face, I still had no answer for that. The echo of his question was still vibrating in my chest. I walked into the living room and leaned my head against the cold window glass. I stared at my faint reflection, the scar on my brow pale in the dark. The cash, the gun, the scars. None of it was normal, yet I hadn't run from the office. I turned from the window to face him. Dominic stood in the doorway, his silhouette blocking the hall light. I could only see the shape of him. "You asked me a question," I said. My voice was steadier than I felt. "I need an answer first. Who are you?" "Really?" He stepped into the room. The light from a single lamp caught the side of his face. He looked older than he had minutes before. "My name is Dominic Morty," he said. His tone was flat, like he was reading a police report. "I am the underboss for the Morty family. I manage the day-to-day operations. I settle disputes. I enforce the rules." He listed the facts without pride or shame. A cold numbness spread through my stomach. Hearing it said out loud was different from knowing it. "And Crow?" I asked. "Sila's Crow runs the syndicate moving product through the South Docks," he said. "He wants our territory. He knows you were in my office. He knows you heard things. That makes you a key to getting to me." He took a slow breath. His eyes seemed to look right through me. "There is a program, witness protection. They can make you and Liam disappear. New names, new lives, it's the only way. No, I said. The word was out before I could think. I won't be erased. I won't let him chase me out of my own life. Dominic's control snapped. He crossed the room in 2 long steps. He didn't touch me. He stopped close enough that I could see the tired lines at the corners of his eyes. He put his hands on the back of a chair, his fingers pressing hard into the wood. This isn't a choice about your life, Alina, he said. His voice was low and rough. It's about keeping one. Crow doesn't make threats, he makes examples. I understood then why my heart didn't slow when he turned his back. It was because I was waiting for him to turn around. I was waiting for the man who hid a photo of a smiling woman to look at me like that. He didn't. He just looked defeated. You take the deal, or you sign your brother's death warrant. And your own. He let go of the chair. The silence that followed was absolute. That question, why he hadn't looked at me like the woman in the photo, sat there like something unfinished. The cold from his marble floor had seeped into the soles of my feet. Liam's precinct desk lamp carved a yellow pool from the squad room's gloom, highlighting the sticky ring left by a coffee cup. My brother sat motionless behind his computer. His glasses reflected the blue light of the screen. He adjusted them, a familiar gesture that now looked slow and heavy. The missing persons report was flagged for a reason, Liam said. His voice was quiet, meant only for me. He clicked open a file. A photo of a young woman appeared. She was smiling in a sunlit park. Her last known contact was with a city councilman's aide for a charity gala. He scrolled down. I saw a scanned invitation, then a blurry security still. The aide was talking to a man in a dark suit by a limousine. The man had a thick neck and watchful eyes. He was one of Crow's drivers. I'd seen him before. Liam pulled up a financial record next. It was a donation log. The councilman's charity, Liam said, pointing at the screen. It's a shell. The funds get washed through 3 different accounts. He traced a line with his finger. It ended at a holding company. I recognized the name from Dominic's coded files. It was a Crow front. My stomach dropped. This was the link. The councilman wasn't just corrupt. He was owned. I felt a sharp, cold fear. This was a different kind of danger. This wasn't a street-level threat. This was the system itself. Liam had just connected a missing girl to a city official and a crime syndicate in one move. He took off his glasses and rubbed his eyes. The skin there was pale and pinched. He understood. The investigation was no longer just a case. It was a direct challenge to someone with power, someone who could make a detective disappear with a phone call. He wasn't just scared. He was realizing how small his badge was. The people who ran this city controlled its police, its courts, its missing persons reports. And he had their proof. The part I hadn't figured out was why I'd stopped breathing when I saw that name. The cold from that dark street had settled deep in my bones. I couldn't get warm. I stood alone in the safe house kitchen, listening to the frantic hum of the refrigerator. Then I heard his footsteps in the hall. Dominic stopped in the doorway. He leaned against the frame and just watched me. His suit jacket was gone, his sleeves rolled up. The harsh kitchen light showed every line on his face. He moved into the room and filled a glass with water. He didn't look at me. His hands, the ones I'd seen handle a gun, were steady on the tap. But then he paused. He held the full glass without drinking. He looked at the water like it held an answer he needed. The quiet stretched out. I saw the muscles in his forearm tighten then relax. It was a small crack in his control. I never wanted you to see that picture, he said. His voice was low, meant only for the space between us. He still didn't turn. That woman was a promise I couldn't keep, a life I couldn't have. He finally set the glass down with a soft click. I look at you, he said, and I see the same promise. I see the same life walking away. He turned then. We were only a few feet apart. The air felt heavy and still. I could see the dark stubble along his jaw, the faint shadow of exhaustion under his eyes. He took half a step closer, then stopped himself. His hand lifted slightly, as if to reach out. It fell back to his side. I held my breath. My own hands were cold against my arms. We stood there in the humming silence, 2 people trapped in a room with a truth too big to touch. Why his hand had lifted only to fall away. I didn't like the answer. The cold, wet imprint of the sink was still pressed against my lower back. I stood in the living room doorway, my bare feet feeling the sudden change from linoleum to a worn Persian rug. Dominic was across the room, his back to me. He was looking at his phone, his head bowed with a weight that had nothing to do with business. Then the world exploded. A heavy van smashed through the front gate with a scream of metal. The crash shook the floor. My coffee mug slipped from my hand and shattered on the rug. Dominic moved faster than I could think. He grabbed his gun from the counter and was at my side in 2 strides. "Move," he said. His voice was flat and hard. Armed men kicked in both the front and back doors at the same time. Splinters of wood filled the air. The smell of damp night flooded the room. Dominic fired 2 shots towards the front. He grabbed my arm and pulled me towards the kitchen. We ran. Bullets punched holes in the wall behind us. I pressed a fist to my sternum. We made it to the kitchen island. Dominic fired again over my head. His free hand pressed down on my shoulder, keeping me low. I saw his jaw working, a muscle flexing near his ear. A metal canister rolled into the hallway. It hissed and spewed thick gray smoke. In seconds, we were trapped. The smoke burned my eyes and throat. I coughed. Dominic looked at the high, narrow window above the sink. It was our only way out. He shoved me towards it. "Go." I climbed onto the counter. He boosted me up. My fingers scrambled at the latch. I kicked it open. I fell through the opening and landed hard in the wet alley behind the house. Pain shot through my ankle. I scrambled to my feet, my back against the cold brick wall. I looked back at the silent, smoking house. Dominic did not follow. I put it away and got on with things. I couldn't understand why he didn't come through that window. A deep ache pulsed from the knife wound beneath the bandage on my ribs. The only light in the motel room came from the red vacancy sign outside, painting the floral wallpaper a garish pink. Dominic knelt on the worn carpet beside the bed. He opened a small metal first aid kit. The zipper rasped in the quiet. He worked without speaking. His hands were clean now, but his white dress shirt was smudged with dirt from our escape. He peeled back the tape, holding the cloth to my side. His fingers were careful. I was scared. My hand stopped shaking, which was worse. The shaking moved to my whole body then. Tears fell silently and dripped onto my dirty shirt. I hugged my knees tight to my chest. I rocked slightly on the scratchy bedspread. The smell of cheap motel soap filled my nose. Dominic pressed a fresh pad of gauze against the cut. He taped it down with a firm, precise pressure. He looked at my face for a second too long. I didn't know what it meant. Someone in his world was always watching. That thought made the tears come faster. He finished and closed the kit. He didn't move from the floor. "My brother," I said. My voice broke on the word. "They know about Liam. They'll use him to get to me." I covered my face with my hands. I could still smell the blood on my skin. The guilt was a physical weight on my chest. I had dragged my only family into this. Dominic was quiet for a long moment. I heard him take a slow breath, then his hand lifted. It moved toward my face where I had been crying. I saw it happen. His fingers almost touched my cheek, but then his hand stopped. It fell back to his knee. He made a fist there. "Look at me." His voice was low. I lowered my hands. He looked up at me from the floor. His eyes were dark in the red light. "I will get your brother. I will bring him to a place Crow cannot touch." He said it like a fact. It was a vow. This wasn't a business promise. It was something else. He held my look. He didn't blink. The control he always had was still there. But the reason for it felt different now. It felt like it was for me. The space between us in that dim room was small. Neither of us closed it. The weight of what he said and what he almost did just hung there. Later, I pressed the cold, grimy receiver of a payphone to my ear. The line rang once. A sharp sound in the quiet night. I watched the dark street from the booth's smeared glass. My brother's secret number was my only lifeline. "Elena, listen." Liam's voice was a strained whisper. I could hear his quick, shallow breaths over the line. He sounded like a man trying not to run. "They're asking about a woman. They have the councilman. I think they followed me from the diner." I saw a shadow shift in the reflection of the diner window across the street. Just a shape against the light, but it moved with purpose. My own breath stopped in my chest. "Liam, get out of there right now," I said, my voice low and urgent. The line went dead with a soft click. A man in a dark coat was standing outside my phone booth. He placed a pale hand flat against the glass, his expression blank. I slowly hung up the heavy receiver. The plastic felt slick under my fingers. My hope drained away, leaving a hollow, cold space behind my ribs. I was not at a safe house. I was in a trap. 2 more men appeared from the alley beside the diner. They walked slowly, their shoes making soft, wet sounds on the concrete. The first man, his hand still on the glass, smiled. It was a small, tight smile with no warmth in it. I had no weapon. I raised my hands, palms open, in a useless gesture of surrender. I understood then what they wanted. They didn't want the phone. They wanted the person who was called. They wanted possession. The cold from the asphalt still seeped through the knees of my jeans. I pushed open the diner's heavy door, and the smell of old grease and burnt coffee wrapped around me. The bell jangled. Dominic was already in a corner booth, his back to the wall. A skinny guy with a worn leather jacket sat across from him. His eyes darted toward me and then away. I slid in next to Dominic. His arm came to rest on the back of the booth, behind my shoulders. It wasn't a casual move, it was a claim. "Mickey, this is Alina," Dominic said. His voice was low and flat. Mickey nodded quickly. His fingers tapped a nervous rhythm on the chipped table. A fly buzzed against the window. Dominic didn't look at me. He kept his eyes on Mickey. "You know why I called you," he said. "I need a location." "I don't know nothing, Dom," Mickey said. His voice cracked. "I'm out, you know I'm out." "You see things," Dominic said. His hand, the one resting behind me, curled into a loose fist against the vinyl. "You hear things. A truck moved last night. A special shipment. Who took it? Where did it go?" Mickey shook his head. I saw the fear in his eyes. It was a real physical thing. "I can't. They'll know it was me. They'll come for my sister." Dominic leaned forward. The movement was slow and controlled. He placed his other hand on the table, palm down. His signet ring clicked against the hard surface. "Your sister is safe because I allow it," he said. The words were quiet and absolute. "My brother is not. You will tell me what you know." Mickey swallowed hard. He looked from Dominic's face to his hand on the table. He reached into his jacket pocket. Dominic's whole body went still, ready, but Mickey pulled out a folded piece of paper. He slid it across the table. "Manifest for Pier 18 South," he whispered. "That's all I got. They're watching you too, Dom. They know you're asking." He stood up, his chair scraping loud on the linoleum. "Your loyalty is your own problem now." He hurried out. The bell jangled again. Dominic picked up the paper. He didn't open it right away. He just looked at it. His shoulders were tense, but his eyes showed something else. A tired kind of sadness. He had gotten what he needed, but the cost was written on his face. The pressure of Mickey's frightened stare still sat like a stone in my gut. Later, in the safe house kitchen, I stared blankly at the chipped laminate counter. Dominic came in and placed the gun between us. It was black and heavy. He did not look at me. "You need to know how this works," he said. His voice was flat. He picked it up. His hands moved with a practiced ease that was its own kind of violence. He showed me the safety, the magazine release, how to rack the slide. The metal clicked and snapped. I watched his fingers. They were steady. I thought of those same fingers wiping blood from my face. The warmth of that memory clashed with the cold weight of the gun he now offered. He held it out to me, grip first. "Take it." I didn't want to. My hand lifted anyway. The gun was heavier than I expected. It made my arm feel weak. Dominic watched me hold it. Then he did something strange. He closed his eyes for a long second. When he opened them, he looked tired. Not just tired, but worn down to the core. It was a crack I had never seen before. "I used to know which side of the door I was on," he said. He hadn't planned to say it. I heard it in the quiet way the words fell out. He wasn't looking at the gun or at me. He was looking at some point on the floor between us. "My life was there. Your life was here. It was simple." He stepped closer then. He wasn't touching me. I could feel the heat from his body. I still held the gun awkwardly between us. Our faces were only inches apart. I could see the faint lines at the corners of his eyes. I could see the dark stubble along his jaw. He was searching my face for something. I didn't know what to give him. The air felt thick and still. My heart beat hard against my ribs. He didn't move. I didn't move. The moment stretched out, thin and taut. The gun was a dead weight in my hand. It was the answer to the question I'd asked in the dark. The man in the dark coat had been waiting for me to call Dominic. He'd been waiting for this, for Dominic to choose a side and to bring me across the threshold with him. Dominic's breath brushed my cheek. He was going to say something else, or maybe he wasn't. His lips parted slightly. Then he stopped. He took a slow step back. The space between us filled with everything we had not done. And I knew, right then, what he was going to say before he stepped back. I wasn't going to like the answer. My boots crunched over broken glass and frozen salt spray at the warehouse loading dock. Dominic stopped ahead of me and raised a closed fist. He was listening. The only sounds were a distant buoy groaning and water dripping from a rusted pipe overhead. He pointed to a side door hanging open on one hinge. We moved toward it without a word. He hadn't chosen me. Something else had put us here. There was a difference. Inside, the air smelled of stale fish and diesel fuel. Dominic pulled a small flashlight from his pocket and shielded the beam with his hand. The narrow slice of light swept across the concrete floor. It caught fresh scuff marks and a dark, dried streak that could have been oil or something else. He paused then, his head tilting just a fraction. His breath hitched once, a tiny catch in his throat I almost missed. He didn't look at me. He just stood there in the near dark, the light trembling slightly in his grip. "Don't touch anything," he said, but his voice was lower than usual, almost rough. "They moved him recently. This is the place." He moved the light to a pile of discarded restraints in a corner, then to a stack of shipping crates. One crate was newer than the others, its stenciled label clear under the light. It was addressed to the same pier number Mickey had given him. Dominic stared at the label for a long moment. His free hand came up and pressed against his own chest, right over his heart. It was an absent, vulnerable motion. I didn't know what to do with it. "Clear," he whispered, and motioned me forward. The main storage area was cavernous and empty. We were halfway across when a metal door clanged open on the far side. Voices echoed, followed by the sharp beam of a real flashlight sweeping the floor. Dominic grabbed my arm and pulled me behind a large metal drum. We crouched together, my back pressed against his chest. I could feel the steady, heavy beat of his heart through our layers of clothing. His arm was locked around me, holding me in place, holding me still. He controlled every inch of my movement, and in that second I let him. That question, why he'd pressed his hand to his chest over that label, sat there between us like something unfinished. The cold, briny taste of the warehouse air still clung to the back of my throat. Dominic's safe room was a silent, sterile box. The only warmth was the faint, amber glow of a single low-wattage bulb. The air smelled filtered and new, like plastic. I watched him as he checked the door's bolts for the third time. His movements were tight and quick. "You knew," I said. My voice was flat in the small room. "You knew Silas Crow was into trafficking before we even went to that warehouse." He did not turn around. He just placed both palms flat against the steel door. The muscles in his back were rigid under his shirt. I felt a hot anger push up through my fear. "You used Liam as bait to confirm your own information. That manifest in your pocket was never for finding him. It was for finding Crow." Dominic turned then. His face was pale in the bad light. A single vein stood out on his temple, pulsing fast. "It is not that simple," he said. His voice was rough. "Make it simple for me," I shot back. I took a step forward. "You swore to get my brother back, but this feels like you are hunting your rival, and Liam is just the trail. Tell me why Silas Crow matters this much to you." I needed to understand the obsession. I needed to see the man behind the mission. He was silent for a long time. He looked at the floor, then at his own hands. When he finally spoke, the words came out stripped bare. "My sister," he said. He stopped and swallowed hard. "Her name was Gianna. She was 17. She wanted to see a band in the city." He looked at me, and his eyes were hollow. "A man offered her a ride home. He was not a good man. They found her 2 days later." He said it with a terrible, quiet finality. The room felt colder. I understood then. The photo of the young woman erased from his life, the cold fury he carried. This wasn't just business. It was a tomb he lived inside. My anger drained away, leaving a sharp ache behind. He'd built his whole world from that loss. He controlled everything because he couldn't control that. I didn't know what to say. The space between us was filled with his grief. My jaw ached from clenching my teeth. I blinked in the sterile quiet of the safe house. The only sound was the low hum of a refrigerator. Dominic stood by the window. He parted the blinds with 2 fingers to check the empty street below. He didn't look at me. The silence between us was a new thing, raw from his confession. I leaned against the cold marble of the kitchen island. I watched his reflection in the dark window. His shoulders were set in their usual rigid line, but his head was bowed just a little. It was the posture of a man too tired to keep up the full weight of his own shield. He let the blind fall back into place with a soft click. He didn't turn around right away. "I keep a photo of her in the car," he said to the window. His voice was flat. "In the glove box, a different one, just so I don't forget her face." He said it like he was reporting a fact, not sharing a secret. It was an answer to a question I hadn't asked. The admission was so small and so huge it stole my breath. He finally turned. The distance from the window to the island was only a few steps. He stopped just outside my personal space. I could see the faint lines at the corners of his eyes. The air between us felt warm and heavy, like the moment before a storm. I could have reached out. He could have closed the gap. We just stood there, trapped in the awful understanding of what the other had lost. My foot brushed my bag. I looked down to move it and saw the corner of Liam's phone peeking out. I'd taken it from the payphone after we fled. Seeing it now was like a slap. All that fragile, aching pull between us snapped. "You said you'd get him back," I said. My voice broke. I picked up the phone and held it out like an accusation. "This is all I have of my brother, because your world took him." The raw, scraped feeling in my throat from screaming at him lingered through a night of clenched silence. The morning light through the safe house window was a cold, flat slab on the dusty floorboards. I sat on the stiff couch and watched Dominic pace the small living room. His phone was pressed to his ear. He spoke in low, clipped Italian, his free hand gesturing with short, precise cuts through the air. I felt a dull throb behind my eyes. Between calls, he stopped by the window. He looked out at the empty street below. His hand went to the back of his neck. He rubbed at the skin there in a slow, tired circle. It was a gesture I had never seen him make before. It made him look ordinary, and that was somehow worse. I didn't know what to say to that man, so I said nothing. "The driver from last night," he said suddenly, not turning from the window. His voice was flat. "He worked the door at a club I owned years ago. He was always too eager for easy money." He finally looked at me. His eyes were dark and full of a quiet blame, but it wasn't directed at me. Crow finds men like that. He turns their greed into a leash. I stood up because I couldn't sit still. His stare broke when I moved. He went back to his phone, making another call. I walked to the barren kitchenette, my fingers trailing over the cold laminate counter. I needed to do something. I opened a drawer. It was empty. I opened the cabinet below the sink. There, tucked behind a bottle of cleaner, was a knife. It was a kitchen knife, but its edge looked newly sharpened. The handle felt cold and sure in my hand. I put it back exactly where I found it. Everything else I could deal with. Why he'd hidden a sharpened knife behind the cleaner was different. The ghost of Dominic's hand on my shoulder still prickled against my skin. I stood at the rust-scabbed gate of the container yard, tasting the sour smell of the harbor mudflats. The informant's recorded words had led me here, to Yard 7. I had to move before Dominic arrived. I slipped the gate chain-free and stepped onto the cracked asphalt. The yard was a maze of steel boxes under a sickly yellow security light. My own breathing was too loud in my ears. I moved between the towering containers, my shoes crunching on broken glass. The only sound was the distant groan of a ship's horn. I reached the clearing the informant described. A single container stood with its doors slightly open. My heart hammered against my ribs. I pulled Liam's phone from my pocket and opened the screen. I had to see what he saw. I held it up, aligning the photo he took with the container before me. The rust pattern on the door matched perfectly. Hope, sharp and painful, cut through me. He had been here. I pushed the heavy door wider. The space inside was empty except for a single wooden chair. A man sat in it, but it wasn't Liam. He turned his head. Silas Crow, the man from Dominic's files, smiled at me. His silver hair was neat under the dim light. His pale blue eyes were calm and empty. He stood up slowly. "Miss Vance," he said. His voice was smooth, like a news anchor. "I'm so glad you could make it." I backed up a step. Men appeared from behind the other containers, blocking my way out. "Where is my brother?" My voice was flat and dead. "Safe," Silas said. He took a step closer. "For now, this was just a confirmation. I needed to see if Morty would send you, or if he would come himself. Now I know he's compromised." He looked at the phone I still clutched. "You see, the photo was a lure. A test. Dominic broke protocol for you. That makes you a liability to his family, and a valuable asset to me." The cold understanding washed over me. I had walked into a trap. I had delivered myself to him. I had nothing to bargain with. Headlights swept across the yard. Dominic's car screeched to a halt just outside the gate. He got out fast, his long coat swinging. He saw me standing there with Silas. He saw the men surrounding me. His face changed then. It wasn't just anger. It was a raw, open wound of a look. Silas raised a hand in a mocking wave. "Your property is quite determined, Dominic," he called out. "But you should keep better track of your things." Then he nodded to his men. They melted back into the container maze, taking Silas with them. I was left alone in the clearing, exposed. Dominic stared at me from across the empty yard. The space between us felt like a canyon. The cold harbor air had settled deep in my bones. The van's leather seat was frigid against my back. Dominic slammed the rear door shut. He locked it with a heavy clunk. He went to the driver's seat without looking at me. The van started with a smooth vibration. He drove for a long time, his movements sharp and precise. He took turns fast, then slowed, then sped up again. He was running a pattern to lose anyone who might follow. I watched the city lights blur past the tinted windows. My brother was gone because of this man's world. My anger was a hard stone in my chest. He finally parked inside a dark, quiet garage. The engine cut out. The silence that followed was thick and complete. He didn't move for a full minute, then his shoulders dropped just a little. It was a small thing, a release of pressure. I had only ever seen him perfectly straight. He rested his forehead against the steering wheel. The dome light was off, so I saw it in silhouette. It was the posture of a tired man, not a boss. He turned in his seat to face me. The space between us felt very small. "I need to know why you went to him," he said. His voice was flat. "You said you would get Liam back," I said. "You failed. I had to try something." "I told you I would handle it." "Your way was too slow." I held his look. "I found the knife you hid, behind the cleaner. I took it because I didn't trust you to do what was needed." He was very still. Then he gave a single, slow nod. It was an admission. "For you," he said, his words quiet, "if they ever got past me, a last resort, not for a frontal assault on Sela's Crow." He had thought of my capture. He had planned for my last stand. The reality of his planning was a cold wash down my spine. He unbuckled his seatbelt and shifted. He leaned closer, one arm braced on the center console. I could see the fatigue around his eyes in the dim garage light. I could smell the faint scent of his soap and the harbor on his coat. We were close enough that our breath might have mingled in the cold air. He didn't reach for me. I didn't lean away. The choice hung there, unacted upon. The van felt like the only space left in the world. The cold metal of the handcuff still ached around my wrist. My heels clicked against the polished concrete floor of the preparation room. The air was so chilled it felt sharp in my nostrils. A single guard watched from a stool by the only door. His eyes tracked me as I paced. I stopped at the long steel table bolted to the floor. My reflection in its surface was pale and fractured. His world had almost killed me once. It would try again. Dominic stood by a bank of monitors showing empty auction hall chairs. He held a shipping manifest, his fingers pressing hard enough to whiten the paper. He looked over at me. His focus was absolute, but a single muscle in his cheek jumped in a quick, nervous rhythm. He was afraid, not for himself, but for what came next. "I need you to listen now," he said. His voice was low and flat. "The bidders are arriving. Sela's will bring Liam out soon. We go the moment I give the signal." He walked to the table and placed a small, sealed evidence bag next to my bound hand. Inside was a data spike. "Liam planted this. It will disrupt their feeds for 90 seconds. That's our window." He paused too long before his next sentence. He looked down at his own empty hands. "I prepared a knife for you, in the safe house kitchen, because I knew you'd fight, and I knew you'd need something quiet." The emotional spike hit me like a physical blow. He hadn't just given me a tool. He'd predicted my last stand. He'd armed me for it. The guard shifted on his stool, his hand moving to his gun. I picked up the evidence bag with my free hand. The plastic was cool and smooth. 90 seconds, I repeated. My own voice sounded strange to me. "Once we're in the hall, you go left, I go right. Find Liam, get him to the service corridor." Dominic pulled a key from his pocket and reached for my wrist. His fingers were surprisingly gentle as they unlocked the cuff. The skin beneath was red and raw. He didn't let go of my hand right away. His palm was warm and rough. The bond between us registered then, a live wire of shared terror and purpose. He looked at me, and for a second his calm mask was gone. I saw only a tired, desperate man. I pulled my hand away. The guard's radio crackled to life with a burst of static. A voice said, "Move the product to the stage. Now." On the monitor, a door at the front of the hall swung open. Two men dragged Liam into the light. His glasses were gone, his face was bruised. But his head was up, his eyes scanning the room. He was looking for a way out. He was looking for me. I pushed it aside. Why he'd scan the crowd for me with his head up would come back. My chest still ached from the cold storage room. I blinked against the sudden glare of the auction floor, my senses hit by the murmur of polished voices and the clink of glasses. I kept my head down and moved through the crowd. They wore expensive suits and gowns. I felt the hard shape of the stolen keycard in my palm. Dominic's men would begin their distraction soon. My only job was to find the holding cells. A sharp crack echoed from the front entrance. It was followed by shouting and the shatter of glass. The genteel murmur broke into confused alarm. Guards in dark uniforms rushed toward the noise. I saw my chance and slipped down a side corridor marked authorized personnel. The door clicked shut behind me, muting the chaos. The hallway was silent and lit by harsh fluorescent lights. I moved fast, checking door numbers against the information from Liam's data spike. I found the reinforced door labeled Secured Holding. My stolen keycard beeped green, the lock disengaged with a heavy thud. I pushed inside and saw a row of cells. Liam was in the last one. He stood up when he saw me, his face pale under the lights. "Elena, how did you?" he started. I hushed him and fumbled with the keycard on the cell's electronic panel. The door slid open with a slow hiss. I felt a rush of pure relief. I reached for his hand. A touching reunion. A calm voice came from the doorway. Silas Crow stood there, his silver hair perfect. He held a small, elegant pistol pointed at us. 2 of his personal guards flanked him. "But this is my property." I stepped in front of Liam. Silas's pale eyes showed no feeling at all. He looked at me and didn't look away. "Dominic always did have expensive taste," he said. "And a bad habit of trying to take what's mine." The main door to the secure wing blew inward with a deafening crash. Smoke and dust billowed into the hallway. Dominic Morty stepped through the wreckage, a rifle in his hands. His suit jacket was torn. There was a fresh cut on his temple. He saw Silas with the gun on us and went very still. His eyes found mine for a fraction of a second. In that look, I finally understood why he'd scanned every crowd for me with his head held high. He wasn't looking for a threat. He was looking for a fixed point, the one thing he couldn't afford to lose. Now we were all just pieces on Silas's board. The cold pressure of Silas's gun still pressed a phantom circle against my ribs. The security hub's sterile white light stung my eyes. Silas kept his weapon trained on me. He pulled my brother Liam closer against his chest. "Right on time, Morty," Silas said. His voice was calm like a news anchor. Dominic stood in the shattered doorway. He held his own gun steady. His dark eyes moved from Silas to me and then to Liam. I saw the calculation there. The white walls of the room hummed with the sound of electronics. Dominic took a single step forward. "Let them walk out, Silas. This ends with you and me." Silas laughed a short, dry sound. "It ends when I say it ends. You think you own the city, you think you own her." His arm tightened around Liam's throat. Liam made a choked sound. My breath hitched in my chest. I was scared. My feet felt rooted to the floor. Dominic's expression didn't change, but I saw the way his shoulders settled. It was a small shift, a preparation. The cash, the gun, the scars, none of it was normal. But his stillness was a language I was starting to understand. Then all the monitor screens in the room flickered and died at once. A loud pop came from a server rack. Red emergency lights snapped on, painting everything in a bloody shadow. Liam's digital sabotage. Silas flinched, his head turning toward the sound. It was the only opening Dominic needed. He moved fast, not toward Silas, but to the side, putting himself between the gun and me. Silas fired. The shot was deafening in the small room. Dominic jerked but kept coming. He slammed into Silas, driving him back against the control console. Liam stumbled free, coughing. I grabbed Liam and pulled him down behind a steel desk. The 2 men fought in the jagged red light. It was brutal and silent, just their grunts and the smash of equipment. Silas was strong, but Dominic was a force driven by something darker. He disarmed Silas with a sharp crack against his wrist. The gun skittered away across the floor. For a second, Dominic had him pinned. He looked at Silas with a flat, final expression. Then he looked over at me. His eyes found mine across the chaos. In that split second, I finally understood why he'd scanned every crowd for me with his head held high. It wasn't about possession. It was about making sure I was still there. Another shot rang out. Dominic flinched hard. A dark patch bloomed high on his shoulder. But he didn't stop. He drove Silas's head into the edge of the console. The man went limp. Dominic stood over him, breathing hard, one hand pressed to his wound. Whatever came next, that look was the part I hadn't figured out. The pressure of Liam's hands pressing a wad of gauze against Dominic's wound was a phantom weight I couldn't shake from my own palms. The safe house was bare. It smelled of antiseptic wipes and dust. A sterile chill already seeping through the thin dawn light at the window. He was on the couch, propped up and too still. The steady rasp of his breathing was the only sound. I sat on the floor beside him. I watched the slow rise and fall of his chest under his torn shirt. My own hands were clean now. They felt useless and cold in my lap. I listened to that breathing for a long time. It was the proof he was still here. He shifted his head on the cushion to look at me. Dominic Morty, the Mafia Boss, looked tired. There was no other word for it. The usual sharp focus in his dark eyes was dulled by pain and blood loss. He watched me without saying anything. Then his eyes closed for a moment too long. When they opened again, the look was different. It was not a look meant for a civilian asset. It was just a look for me. He did not try to hide it. "You should be gone," he said. His voice was low and rough. "You got your brother back. The list is secure. This is where you walk away." He said the words, but he did not move. He did not tell me to leave. "I know," I said. I did not move either. The cold from the floor tiles was seeping into my legs. I watched the line of his shoulder against the couch fabric. I thought about the warehouse, about the knife I had found, about all the times I could have run. I stayed because of the weight in my palms that was not there. I stayed because when he looked for me in a crowd, it was the one time I felt found. He let out a slow breath. "I kept thinking," he said. He stopped. He started again, his words careful. "In the warehouse, I kept thinking if I fell, you would be alone there, in the dark." He looked away from me at the blank wall. It was an admission he never meant to make. It laid everything bare between us. I leaned forward. I rested my arms on the edge of the couch near his hip. We were close then. I could see the faint stubble along his jaw. He turned his head back toward me. The space between us was warm and quiet. I did not reach for his hand. He did not reach for mine. We just stayed like that in the new, fragile silence. The dawn light grew stronger. It turned the dust in the air to gold. It was an almost moment, full of every choice we had not made yet. Why I didn't reach for his hand? I'd been wrong to ignore it this long. Real quick, if you've ever found yourself in a situation where leaving felt like the right choice, but staying felt like the only one, hit subscribe. The next story is about the moment you realize the rules you lived by don't apply anymore. So, what do you think? When someone sees you in a way no one else ever has, do you run toward it or away from it? Let me know in the comments. And if you want more stories that walk that razor's edge, make sure you're subscribed.